Seventh-day Adventists at their best are called to be countercultural. And in the studio, we have Dr. Torben Bergland, and thank you very much for coming in and talking with me. I got to tell you, I'm a bit nervous because you're a psychiatrist, and you're the one usually asking questions, but I get to now question the questioner and see how mentally stable that you are. Is that how it works with the questioning?
Well, like I'm assessing you, I'm reading
your mind. You're assessing me, yes.
I know every question before you'll ask it.
Is that right?
So.
Is that right? So I prepared some questions, and I was like, man, what do I ask an Adventist psychiatrist? We can ask about your personal, your life, and all these things, which I totally. We've worked in the same office for a while, but haven't really gotten to know. But this is kind of the most psychiatrical question I can come up with. At 3 a.m. in the morning, and you can't sleep, and your eyes are wide open, you can't go back to sleep, and you're wide awake. What is Torben Bergland thinking of in those mornings?
Well, I think I have to confess my age. As we get older, sleep quality declines.
Okay.
That's just a part of aging, and sort of it goes downhill. I'm in that process.
So this is happening more and more often.
Well, it happens of course, sometimes more than others. I've been blessed that I've been a quite good sleeper most of my life, but after I became a medical doctor, starting working night shift, that messed up my sleep.
The circadian rhythms are off.
Yeah.
Yes.
So before that I was very regular and happy, like I did medical school, always went to bed before 10 p.m.
Really?
Like to medical, never would work through nights, everything. And actually now we know, the way we know about the importance of sleep, it's a waste of time. Like reading, studying through the night, it's really, you're just messing up your brain, you're messing up your memory functions. It's really, so I did the right thing without knowing it.
Yes, yes.
But it's just so important. But yeah, I guess many of us, like in the dark of the night, end up thinking about life, thinking about what am I doing with my life, am I doing the right thing, think a lot about the church. I've grown up in the church, I've been passionate about the church all my life, but that's also now, especially also since the last years I've been working in the church. I never expected to do that. Was working outside in the hospital system.
Okay.
Was a quite regular psychiatrist. But had the privilege now the last years of working also in the church.
Now you worked for the Trans-European Division as their health ministries director. Yeah.
I did that for 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
So since 2016 I've worked for the church. I was in Trans-European Division, like based outside London.
Based in England.
I thought I would be there a long time. Lovely place. I miss England so much. And the weather is nice in England, in case anyone wonders.
The weather is nice in England?
The weather is really nice in England.
Isn't it like rainy and
But that's the idea I had when I
foggy
went. That's the idea I had. Like I grew up actually in England. My dad was a pastor. So I basically, my first preschool years was at Newbold College as a boy. But I never went back to England actually until 2014 was the first time.
So then home for you is Norway.
Okay. Norway is, even though I don't know how many years I lived outside.
Okay.
So yeah, but went back to London and absolutely loved. It's a beautiful city and the weather is much better than its reputation. But then I'm a Norwegian, realizing that the precipitation per year in Oslo is twice that of London.
I see. So everything's relative.
Everything is relative, like it's expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now you're here in the United States working at the General Conference in Maryland, where the weather is all the time wonderful. Yes.
Quite good. Yeah.
And you went into psychiatry, and I guess that was what I've always been enamored with. There is, to be frank, there is a certain tension between the mental sciences, whether that's psychiatry or psychology or neuroscience and an Adventism, just the history. There's been a certain, don't know what the right word is, but mystery, a little bit of
there's tension.
Tension.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then right now, the current milieu is mental health is all the rage, and after the pandemic, it's a big topic. You seem like, an Esther for such a time as this, for your education and your ministry coming together for this point in history, yeah?
Well, it's been, for me, a nice time to come in. I think before there would be much more resistance. What I experience now, because I travel around the world, get some feel for what the sentiments are around the world. And I experience that the church is or people at least, are very open and interested and really want to hear and learn. And it's also a nice thing because I feel to some extent people, I don't mean this sort of in any derogatory sense, but people don't know that much about mental health. Like as Adventists,
sure, there's mystery.
We think and we feel like that in general health we'll know about lifestyle and these things, but we haven't focused that much on mental health and talked about that. And what I feel, sometimes I feel, what I'm going to share now is so boring, it's so basic stuff. And then people are excited because it's like these essential building blocks for understanding how we function, what is important to us, what gives life meaning and purpose, because that's what my experience is, that religion gives those answers, but at the same time that's very much the focus of psychology, even though psychology is not prescriptive and doesn't have quite the same level of ideology as religion has, but still there are many values in psychology that I experience, having been in this field now for almost 2 decades. I feel there is a lot of synergies, more than problematic areas of conflict.
Give us some examples, some concrete. Where are some overlaps that you?
Well, historically, psychiatrists and psychologists, when you think Freud, you think even cognitive psychology, thinking ideas. Some of those leaders, pioneers, they were critical of religion in general. Many of them were. There were those who were very fascinated by religion, and even Freud was. He actually, we think that he contributed to our understanding of religion, even though he ends up saying this is immaturity. It's something that you
even by attacking religion, we learn more things about it and more different insights.
Yeah. Well, I think he was more like a scientist.
Okay.
Was interested in the phenomena.
Okay.
But then came from it from a more atheistic perspective, and that of course guided him. And to be fair, also I would think the environment, culture, was more religious, was more Christian at that time. He probably had quite a few patients who were struggling, and also probably struggling because of religion, misguided religion, concepts within religion that actually were not mentally healthy. So when that's what you see, and I've seen plenty of that in my clinical practice. Also, I worked in a hospital in Norway that was a Christian hospital, run by a Christian foundation. Anyone could come, but we still also worked in a department where we specifically worked based on the principle of psychology of religion, where we integrated the religious dimension of life into how we worked with patients and understood them. I saw we had many Christians, actually primarily Christians, who would come to us, and I heard so many stories of harm done to people within religious communities, Christian communities. And my experience was that that was not really that the specific denomination or religious tradition was the problem in itself. It is more that when you have people who are psychologically and relationally dysfunctional, struggling, when you mix religion into that, then religion becomes dysfunctional and harmful. In many, it happens. It's just inevitable.
So it's not religion is causing it; it's just a layer that's parsed out from that.
That's what I would say. Like the driving force is the psychological relational problems that corrupts the religion. Of course, it can argue, are there religious traditions, Christian traditions, that are more healthy, less healthy than others? Yes, there probably are, and I hope that our Adventist tradition is one of the healthier in that, and I think it has the potential. But we had Adventist patients coming to our department who struggled because of unhealthy Adventism. And really, that's where, for me, coming in now working for the church, I want to help people with mental health issues, but I also want to help us to avoid the pitfalls of unhealthy Adventism.
So can you describe what are some of these things that the struggles, we talked about mental health problems in general, but more specific, what are we talking about?
Well, for me, the big overarching problem that I see is when we as individuals or communities, families or whatever community it is, become very self-centered. We also typically become legalistic. There's abuse of power. There is lack of love. While to me, I see good religion, good Adventism is countercultural. It's a counter perspective. It challenges that. And that's why I also, the way I understand the emphasis of the Bible, the biblical story, is that it's a story about God as loving, and that is the foundation of everything, and that's what is the true counter-cultural or the anti-satanic goal of everything is to counteract whatever is satanic, and that's what I believe. It is selfishness, self-centeredness, lack of love. These are the things that also harm and hurt us mentally and relationally, and that's really where I think our focus need to be. That we are these communities where people are cared for, where people are loved, where they can learn about love. I think that's one of my concerns. Sometimes we first it's sort of we think that, or sometimes love becomes a sort of theoretical construct, and we think
abstract, ambiguous. So it's just on the back burner.
And we think sort of when we talk about love, well, that's everyone knows what that is, and people may know that on a theoretical level, but that does nothing for us. And also in terms of our religion, if I on a theoretical level know that God loves me, but if that's it, if that's not an experiential thing, if that's not an emotional thing, it really won't do much for us. And that's what I've seen also so much in patients I worked with. Often they could have everything right theologically. I would say that they had the theory, they had listened to all the sermons, they had gotten many things right theoretically, but because they hadn't experienced, especially in a relational, healthy context, these ideals that we as Christians, as leave it at Christians because I'm talking in general. But that like everything as Adventist, like all these good things should just be amplified. Even so, like our expectations to us as Adventists should be even higher. And that's the sadness then when you see it's not reality. That's not what plays out. But people need to experience these things, and that's why I think God came up with community and came up with church. Also, because church is not simple. It's not only about like preaching to the world the right doctrines and convincing people that, well, these are the things we need to believe, but it's also a community. It's a family.
There should be a juice that comes out of the doctrines that it's experienced. So it's not only what we are learning and mentally ascribing to, but there should be the existential component to all these doctrines. And could I be, maybe if I'm extrapolating, but there are some pockets within Christianity, even in Adventism, that if it's about what you just mentioned about love, hey, that is girly, that is frilly, that is fluff, and I just want the hard truth. I want to know about the prophecies, and I want to know, more doctrine and Bible study, and they eschew that experience. And then there's other pockets that embrace it, but it's on a superficial level, and only to level where I know that God loves me and God forgives me, so therefore I've got complete freedom to do whatever I want to do. You have these extremes in the church. Torben, how do we, and maybe if I can ask in the post-pandemic era, what are some ways that we do taste some of this and make it real and have it be more experiential?
I think religion in isolation is very dangerous.
Religion by itself,
or being religious in isolation
as an individual. Without a community.
Without a community, or like an isolated group. So we isolate ourselves from the rest of, whether it's the rest of the church or the rest of the world.
Sure.
I think that's dangerous, because then typically it becomes about like we have the right thing. Like it's just about, it becomes very easily about a theoretical thing. And I think that's very different from, and that's like would be our criticism against those faith traditions that says it's all just about me and God. I'm just cultivating my, like taking care of my soul. That's the only thing that matters. Go into a monastery or do whatever, live out in the wilderness all by myself. I think that's very different from what God intended for us, and that is very different, or that also from a psychological perspective, that's clearly very unhealthy, because health happens in relationships with other people. Like mental health happens in good relationships with other people, and I would say that there's a convergence, like good religion also happens in good relationships with other people. When you like detach like the human interactional community aspect from religion, I think then you're distorting things, and then you're running like just high risk of all kinds of the destructive, unhealthy things that religion can turn into. That's my perspective on religion. It can be a power for the best, but it for sure
the other extreme.
Can be a power for the worst. It's so much power, there's potential for manipulation, control, abuse within religion. Because you're like mixing in, it's not just like a political system or like whatever it is where you're controlling, where you seek things. You have this like bubble around it that sort of everything is good and perfect and everything, and make it look good, and like you can control people in a way that nothing else can, but that's not the way it should be.
I remember I was watching a TED Talk, and this guy was talking about addictions, and that traditionally addictions were treated in isolation and just be by yourself. If you can grit it out for X amount of time and you can be sober, then you can overcome your addiction. But they were finding, and I'm getting my research, I don't know, but his findings were, are these MRIs or PET scans or whatnot, that it's the opposite of addiction is connection, is relationships, and the connection helped overcome addictions. And then the guy was saying, I don't know if he said this, but I didn't get the sense that he was a Christian or a religionist in any way. But he's saying, hey, go to church, because that's a great organic way of getting connected with people.
Sounds like you listen to a Johan Hari.
Okay, you know who he is.
Yes.
Okay.
He's written some very interesting book, like also counter-cultural, and he's critiquing the culture we live in. He's written a book about addictions. He's written one about anxiety and depression. Now the latest his book is Stolen Focus.
Okay.
Now I'm not getting any commission, and he's controversial. Also, he's not a mental health professional.
Okay.
He's a journalist, and he's not a Christian. Also, but still, he is, as I feel also many people do, like non-Christians, they discover some of these foundational values and principles that we as Christians should be promoting. Sometimes some of them promote them better than what we do. One of my favorite atheists is Alan de Botton. He's Swiss English philosopher. Defines himself as an atheist, 2.0. The new, says we need to learn. We need to learn from religion, and he's in the sense of the community, that we need community. It's not about just as hardcore. I'm not an expert on atheism, and I haven't really not that interested in all the debates. But some of the hardcore,
the old classic atheist who articulated theory and the anti-theology of it. But then you have the 2.0 atheists who are into the lifestyle and the community of
That's he has actually. Alain de Botton has a TED Talk on Atheism 2.0, where he says atheism must now learn from religion because people need these things.
Wasn't he advocating we need to have hymns and vacation science schools, not vacation Bible schools, and we need to have worship services, but not for God, but learning from religion and getting it ingrained into a daily cadence and weekly cadence.
Yeah, he's talking about rituals, the need that. These are human needs. We need that, and religion has incorporated those things or have developed those things because it's a reflection of human needs, but also above all community. And he speaks also even about Jesus as this philosopher of love in a way that's it's I would say preach it, brother. But still.
So he's extolling all the benefits of religion and even articulating it better than we are. But from obviously from atheistic presuppositions.
Yeah, but not like you said, not like an aggressive,
angry.
But still, again, I think that's my experience also. I think as Christians, as Adventists, we have a package of things that are very good. I think we have an overall, that's also my perspective on the Adventist health message. It's a package that is quite unique. It's comprehensive. You have the holistic perspective that you may not, you don't find its equal anywhere. But I think we have a lot to learn from others because others may be better on specific areas of this. And that's why I also think we should listen to the atheist who talks about the importance of relationships, who talks about the importance of community, because they also see these things and understand these are basic human needs, that we as Christians, we should be the big promoters. That's what we should have been known for. It's a bit sad when we leave the almost leave the arena because we become obsessed or overly focused on some other things that are not really at the core of the human experience, as really what people crave or our pet beliefs or our dogmas or whatever we may use to feel some kind of that we are better than others. And that's the kind of religion I fear most of all, whenever if you have some kind of sense that, like we've been through like racial issues, quite like we talked about white supremacy, but I think within religious communities there's a lot of supremacy thinking, and that's a human thing, but it's also a satanic thing. That goes back to the origin of the whole sin problem, is that I want to be better, I want to be higher, me above something or someone else. And that's where...
Do you find that observation to be uniquely in religion?
No.
Or just any social organization, social concept?
It's a human thing. You will find that in political systems. You find that in sports. My team is better than your team. It's a human thing.
You think in religion it should be less, let alone in Christianity and in Adventism.
Like it shouldn't be there. Like as religious people, like humility, openness, the willingness, like acknowledgement that I'm a sinner, I'm in need of grace. I need to grow, develop in my relationship with Christ, in my understanding of whatever I need to understand. But most of all, I need to grow in my capacity and ability to love other people. In the end, that is the most important thing of them all. I think that's the Bible story to me also. I think Jesus has these excellent religious leaders, the Pharisees, like they have studied, they have all these things, but they're also religious supremacists. And in the end, they kill Jesus, even though on some level they know who he is. On some level, many of them know he is the Messiah. But still, because he threatens, he challenges their world, how things function, how things tick in their world.
It's convenient for them to remove him.
He becomes a threat. And I think that's where we need, as also we encounter Christ, as we encounter the Bible. Like the Bible is challenging us on so many levels. And we need to be humble enough to appreciate that and say, thank you, Lord.
Where can I ask? What do you think from where you stand as now a global leader of the church? Where does the Bible clash most with culture on a broad level? And then could you share where has the Bible clashed with you personally that you've just had? I mean, while you're talking about humility, I mean, yeah, for sure, that's always a hard thing with self and humility.
Yeah.
Where do you stand as a leader, and what do you think as on a personal level?
Well, I think, like I would say, the great controversy between good and evil, between love and self-centeredness, self-love in a healthy way. Like we need, when we have been genuinely loved by others, we can also have a healthy self-love. But when we have not experienced truly being loved by others, our self-love will often typically become unhealthy.
To compensate for that?
Yeah, you try to create like this fake, often becomes narcissistic. That's a problem, and that's why what I also see. I see like the devil, Satan, Lucifer, as like becoming the first like narcissist. It's the prototypical narcissist, me above everything else. Which, as we talked about, I think that is the big human problem. It's the problem of the universe, and that's what I think. To me, that's where the Bible is countercultural. because it has like the principle of love that it puts up against. It's the antithesis or the original thing, and then you have the devil coming up with a different strategy. And I think that's the whole battle that the world is in. And that's also, I think, where we can struggle, also as Christians, where we do struggle with that.
That's as you articulate. I think that's a universal struggle for the combat. I always articulate it as these two forces in the universe. One is a sun that goes outward, and one is a black hole that goes inward. And these are two trajectories that you find in the universe, and how to combat that trajectory. That naturally you want to just everything to go towards the center. Can we share? Can you share a little bit more about? I know you've talked a lot about fanaticism and extremism, and especially in the Adventist Church, you know, we should be more countercultural in a variety of areas. Maybe there's some of us that are more countercultural than we need to be. How do we define what some of those lines are, and how do we, give us some bearings on this on this map? And how do we provide some healing and bring people to a good place? Yeah.
Well, I think, yes, we should be countercultural in the sense that we have something better to offer. But we're not countercultural in the way that we are better than others, or what else is out there. And I think that is the root problem, typically, of fanaticism, of extremism. It's a conflict perspective, an experience of me against the world, or our group against something. I'm often concerned whenever I experience, which unfortunately also can see within our church community, some people who are more focused on the works of the devil than they're focused on Christ. When people what drives them, what gets them excited, what gathers a crowd is talking about Rome and all the bad things, or conspiracies, or all these bad things, let's say like Sunday laws. Like I believe all these things. I'm a traditional Adventist in my beliefs, but I think things go very wrong when our focus becomes all these things, the problems of the world, and some of them are problems imagined that never will happen. So
we should be mindful of these things as their revelations, but not drive we shouldn't have our zeal derived from them.
No. Yeah. Like it's like the Bible never says, according to my understanding, like that you need to have the complete understanding of end time events if you're going to be saved. The way I understand it, I believe that if I'm connected with Christ, He will take me through whatever I need. So that's like, it's good that we know all these things, and I think they should be sort of faith enhancers. Like when we know things and we see that it happens. My concern is, like I'm talking, we're drifting into different areas.
That's okay.
But like the way I see history and prophecies, to me it seems like seldom have people fully understood these things before it happened. But we should know them, so that when they happen, we will know that there is a God who has a plan, who is moving everything forward towards what He has promised. And that should be a focus. But like, our focus should be on God.
Sure.
Because if that's not, and if it's not, if our focus is not on the good things, the fruits of the Spirit, then we will.
Sure.
If our focus is on the other things, and I think that's what I seen so much. When our focus is not on Christ, then we get typically get the worst of the
So
flesh.
all the prophecy and the concerns regarding eschatology and whatnot, they should drive us to more a Christological focus.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Because like, what's the worth of all that
Right.
if the Spirit is not in it?
Right.
Or if Christ is not in it, or if you're not in a real relationship.
Right.
Like, for me, the saddest thing is when Jesus says sort of like, I have never known you.
Mm-hmm.
When you read like that story, prophecy that Jesus has, it's so tragic, because these people are like, haven't I done all these things? Haven't I been like an exemplary Christian? Haven't I been like the best Adventist there was?
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus says, I have never known you.
Mm-hmm. I find that there are, those who are subsumed with eschatological last day events and whatnot, who are prone to fanaticism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're driven to, like, man, I can't survive this. This is, and so they come to the foot of the cross, or they come to rely on God. But there's also another subset. They're like, no, I can survive it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And that naturally makes them break away and want to turn inwards, and and you could combine that with legalism, and it's just like, I can make it on my own, and it's a do you think that is common in more common in Adventism because we have an eschatological focus? Do you think our evangelism sometimes, because it focuses on these things, that it's a filter for some of to have more members of this persuasion, or do you think that's just a natural part of the human condition?
Like that we corrupt what could have been very good. So like I think that's like the sadness is when we corrupt Adventism. With what is perceived maybe as holy zeal, but it's not sort of the kind of religion you have is not truly infused with the Spirit, and the fruits are not the fruits of the Spirit, but other things. When people become fanatical, extremists, conspiracy theories, that's an indication of a problem.
Okay.
And typically it's fear or a compensation for some sense of inferiority.
Wow.
Often that is sort of like psychologically. Psychologically and spiritually also. And then typically it becomes very self-centered. I appreciate like these things. Like, it can be hard to define and have agreement, but I've seen one definition of fanaticism that for me has been very meaningful, that typically people become very dogmatic. And there's no, we have dogmas, like everyone has some dogmas you believe in. It's not about that you shouldn't believe in anything, but it's when you say, I have the answers to these things and I'm absolutely right. When you don't have the humility of being open to, well, is there something that can be improved? Can you grow? Can you develop? Another trait that's been said, like dogmatic.
Some might understand as conviction too. How do you parse out conviction from overzealousness?
I think it's a good thing to have strong convictions about things, but there should always be also that questioning of yourself, and also the dialogue with God and with the community. Where in this do I need to grow? What have I missed in this? How does this fit into the big picture? But what often happens when people become fanatical extremists, that they can have very strong convictions, and maybe they're not wrong about that thing, but often it becomes like an excessive focus on that one thing, and it becomes something that causes division and conflict. typically like with others, and it can be used also as like that because I have this conviction or I have this knowledge, or that means I am better. Like there's some supremacy kind of feeling that is triggered.
Man, Torben, like as you're parsing this out, man, I'm just thinking of like all these thoughts. I mean, it's so true, so true. There are so many, and I don't think this is just relegated to Adventism, but within all religions, but in Christianity also, people have these convictions on these things, and I appreciate that balance. These things may be the right position to be on, but they have this a tinge of arrogance or that self to it, that this becomes the all-in of all things to stand up and die for, that they get myopic and a certain neurosis attached to this one thing.
And they can become like drivers of hate. Towards
because
others.
The lines that are created.
Yeah. Also because like you use this, and if someone questions, criticizes, or doesn't share the conviction, then that person become a threat. And for me, like as Adventists, we should be able to engage with everyone and anyone on anything. Like if we have the truth, and I'm not saying that like as a question mark, but like like saying like if we believe as we do in things, we should be able to engage with anyone and be in dialogue with anyone about these things, and we should seek to be in dialogue, but we should not like encapsulate ourselves and see like we need now to like protect like this like this precious truth, which maybe actually psychologically for us it's a fragile truth, because we're afraid that if we're so afraid that someone else will destroy it. And I think that's also a pity when that happens within our church community. That also we become like, there becomes whatever convictions we have becomes drivers of hostility and division within the community. And we see, because you don't see things exactly the way I see them, then you are a threat to me, you're a threat to the church, you're a threat to everyone. And becomes conflict, aggression, all these things that, like the works of the flesh, are listed. Like those things, those becomes the fruits or the works that become evident. And when you see that, you can know for sure something is wrong here.
No, I when I was younger, I would see people who are so dogmatic and so angry and so intolerant of any outside view outside of, and I appreciate how you articulated that gem, that I said, man, they must not be that confident in the logic of it, of the understanding of it, or their ability to teach it. I think though, after time though, I learned to disassociate the ideology and the theology from the people. Right, so it's not the idea that the idea itself that was toxic. It's the individual that provides a toxicity to the idea, and to learn to disassociate those two and realize. And also, there may be some ideas that are totally unbiblical, but just because they're a loving person and they're wonderful, that must mean that the idea they're associated with must be true. But just to disassociate the two, and this, you're bringing a lot of observations. I wish I met you earlier that you could diagnose my neuroses at an earlier time.
Well, but I think these are human struggles. And I wouldn't like pathologize them. Also, you won't get I haven't written notes now after this conversation, because I think we've all been there. And I think, like, fortunately, some of us we mellow a bit as we get older. Probably from experience, like understanding there's a bigger picture here. I know I was more to me, radical is a positive word. But I was probably more extreme and fanatical on some things. Had ideas that I was holding on to rigorously. I may still hold on to them now, but I wouldn't use them to knock.
You don't weaponize them.
No, and sort of beat other people with them, because if they don't see that the way I did or do. I think religion is a hard thing. It's not just a head thing. And I think as Adventists sometimes we put a bit too much emphasis on
the cerebral side.
Yes, and all these theories and everything. And sometimes our church culture can be arguing about these things and seeking just to have the right or absolute knowledge about things. But really, it's a change of heart. That is what religion needs to accomplish. A relationship with God, with Christ, a daily lived experience with Him, which leads to being like Him in community. Also, because that's what we are created for. And that's when you see that, I think God has incredible tolerance for that we get some theoretical things wrong, because none of us have everything right. And I don't believe Adventism has everything right, or at least I think there's more to grow and discover also than what we do have. But we need to be a community that is open to that and welcoming of that, both that we welcome the heart side of things, the relationships, the love, the care, the compassion for our fellow men, for the world, but we should also welcome the cerebral side, because God gave us an amazing brain and an ability to ask all these questions. That's part of the human existence also.
I appreciate that. Also, as editor of the Adventist Review, I would remember reading some of the early articles and journals, and when the Adventist movement was coming together, they were pitching different ideas, and hey, do you think this is right? Do you think this is biblical? And then hey, we don't know everything yet. And the Bible verse comes to mind in Proverbs where the righteous man is like the dawn light that gets brighter and brighter towards the day. And so they're learning and learning and learning, and it was that Adventism was just growing experientially on one side, cerebrally on another side. At a certain point, and I don't know, and I'm not a church historian, it seemed like that the cerebral growth was kind of just static, and it was just relegated to just some couple beliefs. But when the early church was the pioneers were getting together, they're like, hey, Ellen White, she said, we need to be shown more new light, get into the Bible and pitch it out there and suggest, and the community comes together and says, hey, this is right, the Sabbath is true, or no, Monday is not the Sabbath, and they would and then with a Christian grace argue some of these things out, and say, we don't think that's the right way. That just sounds a lot more organic, a lot more healthy.
And that's one of the things I'm proud about Adventism. I think our beginnings was very dynamic. The way I read history and from what I know, and there were lots of trouble, lots of problems. That's also part of the history that we need to acknowledge. Early Adventists were far from perfect, and there were many problematic things, both on the theoretical and the relational level. There also, but they did grow, and I hope that openness, that dynamicism, being willing to question everything, hold on to what is good, that we can rekindle and cultivate that also. But it's scary because we're not quite sure where it will take us. And that's just like a human. We as human beings, our primary concern is safety. Typically, that's what and that's why we gravitate towards what is known, even though it may not be the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we see in psychology so much also. People gravitate to certain kinds of relationships, certain kinds of behavior, because they're familiar.
Mm-hmm.
It's somehow safe because I know what this is, but it may not be the best for us. So that it takes courage, and it's anxiety provoking to step a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and also from that position maybe take a look back, like what is this really, what is going on, who am I, who are we actually, are we actually on the right track, or do we need to fix something on this train to have a better journey, and to assure that we reach where we are aimed to go. But that's hard. That is very hard to do.
Well, Dr. Torben, appreciate the focus that you're bringing to the Adventist Church on mental health. We as a people have all been about health, but there's this big donut hole on brain health, on mental health that we haven't put an emphasis on. So appreciate your personal ministry and the ministry you've given to the church. And we thank you for your time, for coming in today.
Thank you very much. It was nice to have this discussion.
This is Torben Bergland. He is the Associate Health Ministries Director for the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists around the world, and we were so privileged to pick at his brain and to ask the psychiatrist some of his takes on what's happening in the church today.